top, no more dreaming. Makes you a world-class speaker. This a complete system, ain't nothing easier.
Welcome everybody to the Communication Lecture Series. I am your host, Adam Banks, and thank you for listening to another episode. This is episode number 5 of the Communication Lecture Series, and this is where I take a communication topic and I lecture on it. Today we are going to discuss presentation aids. I love when my students do presentations and they have visual aids in them. I actually require them to do visual aids in a lot of their speeches. So let me tell you how presentation aids make your presentation better. So first I'll start with the advantages of using visual aids in your presentation. The first advantage is that visual aids can make ideas clear and understandable. Your listeners can easily grasp how you do something if they see it rather than just hear about it. Think about instructions. When you get instructions on how to assemble a coffee table, usually when you look at those instructions, that packet of instructions has pictures in it, and it's showing you how to assemble the table, because it's easier for people to understand that when they're able to see the table being put together rather than just reading about how the table is put together. Another advantage would be visual aids can make a speech more interesting. When you have a presentation with visual aids and anecdotes, that will make people more interested in hearing what you have to say. It keeps people awake. It keeps people entertained. Number 3, visual aids can help an audience remember facts and details. Think of word association. Sometimes you can associate words with an image. When you are giving a presentation on how to do something, if you're giving a demonstrative, informative presentation on how something is done or how something works, you can show images of that. Imagine you giving a presentation on how to use Excel spreadsheet, and you give the presentation one way to a group where you only use words, but then you give the presentation again to another group, and while you're speaking, you're also showing them how the Excel spreadsheet looks and how it works. You're talking and showing visual aids. So those visual aids can help an audience remember facts and details a little bit better. Advantage number 4, visual aids can make long, complicated explanations unnecessary. Have you ever heard the old saying, a picture says 1,000 words? That's what I'm talking about right here. Sometimes just by showing an image, just by showing a picture, it saves so much time than just rambling on and on and on about something. It's just a bunch of unnecessary dialogue. Visual aids can help prove a point. Think about a courtroom. When lawyers are trying to defend their client, they might submit evidence to the jury, and this evidence is all considered visual aids, whether it be a surveillance video, whether it be a murder weapon, whether it be a piece of clothing. Those are all visual aids that can help prove their point in the court of law. Visual aids can add to your credibility. Researchers have found that presenters who use good visual aids are rated by listeners as more persuasive and credible than presenters who use no visual aids. But you want to be careful if you are someone that likes to use a lot of visual aids, because if the listeners find your visual aids are boring or they're poorly put together, their confidence in you as a speaker will decline. In other words, if you can't use a good visual aid, don't use that visual aid at all. And finally, a 7th advantage to using visual aids in your presentation is visual aids enhance communication with people who speak English as a second language. So you think about all of these different tools that are on the market for people to learn how to speak a second language, like Rosetta. Those very expensive programs to help you learn how to speak a different language, they all like to use visual aids, because if they're trying to teach you how to say the word cat, they'll show a picture of a cat with the word with it. Because images help people learn better. It helps them retain the information better. So if you are someone who has an international person in your group of friends, or you're a teacher and you have an international student in your class, visual aids can help that student, can help that person overcome language barriers. All right, so now let's talk about the different types of visual aids. The first type of visual aid that you can use in a presentation is graphs. Graphs helps audience understand and retain statistical data. You can use a pie graph. A pie graph is a circle showing a given whole that is divided into component wedges. So you take basically a bunch of statistical data, some information, and then you put it onto an image that your audience can see that makes it more organized and easier to understand. So if you wanted to use a pie graph, let's say, for instance, you had the statistical data of pet ownership, dogs, cats, fish, rabbits, and rodents. You could have all of those animals listed with a color beside of it. The color will represent that animal. And then you make a pie graph, which is a circle, and then you have the percentages of the pet ownership of each animal in that circle by the color. Now, that might be hard to understand because, again, this is a podcast about visual aids, but ironically, I can't use any visual aids. You just have to listen. But that is basically what you're doing with the graph. You're taking statistical data and placing it into an organized image. So that's a pie graph. You can also use a bar graph. A bar graph is a visual that contrasts two or more sets of data by means of parallel rectangles of varying length. You could, and again, there's a graph here that I can explain, but you pretty much get the gist of what I'm talking about. Some more visual aids that you can use. You can use charts. Charts provide information in compact, easily digested form. You can use drawings and photos. Drawings make good visual aids because they can illustrate points that would be hard to explain in words. There's this old Southern Baptist pastor that used to teach his lessons, used to preach his messages, and the whole time he was preaching, he would be drawing. His name was Dr. Peter Ruckman. He would be preaching, and the whole time he was preaching, he was drawing an image of the topic he was preaching about. And what that did was provided a visual for his congregation, for his audience. It made people cling onto what he was saying. It kept people mesmerized. People were locked on to Dr. Ruckman. They were clinging onto every word he was saying because everything he was saying, he was drawing. Not drawing the words, but he was drawing while he was talking. And it just kept people's attention. And his drawing also helped provide an image to what he was talking about. But drawings can make for good use of a visual aid. If you're giving a demonstrative speech on how to draw an anime character, don't just get up and talk about how to draw it. Talk about how to draw it while you're drawing it. Photos are good. Like I said, you can pass around photos. A picture says 1,000 words. If you are talking about someone in an informative speech, if you're talking about Abe Lincoln, have a pic of Abe Lincoln. Use photos in your presentations. You can use objects and models. Three-dimensional objects make good visual aids, provided they are large enough for the audience to see. An example would be handmade pottery. If you're talking about handmade pottery, on how to make it or where it comes from, bring in those items during your presentation. If you're talking about how to climb a mountain, the proper way to climb mountains, bring in mountain climbing equipment for a visual aid. Musical instruments are good. A model is a representation of the object. An example would be like an airplane, a model airplane, or a homemade lung. A lot of medical school professors use models while teaching their classes. When they're teaching the human body, they'll have a 3D lung for students to look at, or they'll have an object of a human heart. They teach around those objects, so they use those objects as a visual aid. You too, as a speaker, can use things like that while giving your presentation as visual aids. Okay, let's see. More visual aids to use. You can use yourself and volunteers. What I mean by yourself, for instance, you could demonstrate yoga positions. If you're talking about yoga and how to do the steps, you could demonstrate how to do the steps using yourself. You can show self-defense techniques, or judo holds, or karate chops, or stretching exercises. You know, if you watch a workout video, what is something they always do before they tell you to start working out? They show you how to work out. They show you the moves. Those are demonstrations. That's a visual aid. Same with relaxation techniques, ballet steps, tennis strokes. Also, the thing that you wear is a visual aid. The clothes that you wear, your attire. If you're talking about a historical event, wear something from that time frame. If you're talking about Abe Lincoln, wear something that Abe Lincoln would have wore back in his time as presidency. If you're talking about how to go scuba diving, wear a scuba diving outfit. I kid you not, I had a student give a presentation on how to milk a cow, and she came in dressed as Old MacDonald, and she had a volunteer with her who dressed up to be the cow. And that brings me to my next point. You can use volunteers as a visual aid. An example would be using a friend like she did, and you can help. You can have your friend help you show steps like self-defense methods. If you want to show people how self-defense methods are done, you can have a volunteer from the audience come up and help out with that. Okay, so PowerPoint slides. We all probably are familiar with PowerPoint. If you are not familiar with PowerPoint, it's not hard to understand. You have to download PowerPoint's Microsoft Office, but PowerPoint is a great tool for presentations. I recommend using it. It's a great visual aid. So I'm going to go over the basic steps of using PowerPoint slides. Number one, you want to create your outline before you even think about using PowerPoint. And the reason you want to do that is you want to get everything organized in your speech. You need to know the steps, where you're going to be talking about what, and then you go and you lay everything out in your PowerPoint. Your PowerPoint's the last thing you do. Number two, you look at your outline and ask, do I need visual aids to highlight or explain any of my key points? Look at everything in your speech and ask yourself, would a visual aid be helpful here? Would a visual aid be beneficial here? Is a visual aid even necessary here? So just go through all your speech and see if the visual aid is necessary to use or not. Number three, for points that need visual support, decide which type of visual aid would be most effective. Should it be a photo? Should it be a video? Should it be an object? Should it be put in graph form? You decide. You should create your own slides. You should practice in the room where you will be presenting. You need to become familiar with the technology, become familiar with the size of the room. You need to see how everything works in there. And also give your speech making sure that you, not the slides, are the dominant presence in the room. I love a well put together PowerPoint. I like all of the bells and whistles that you can put in them, but don't let that dominate your presentation. Don't put so much bells and whistles in there that it takes away from you, the speaker. You need the attention to be on you, not your actual PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so some more visual aids that you can use. You can use multimedia from the internet. You can use videos. You can use pictures from the internet, imagery from the internet. You can project that onto a screen and show your audience. You can use handouts. Pass things out. Handouts are great because people can look at it throughout your speech. People have a hard copy of something. But be careful with the handouts. Just And what I mean by that is you don't want people to not be paying attention to you while you're speaking and just looking at your handouts and tuning you out. So be cautious. And it also can become a little disruptive when you're passing out papers. There's noise. Some people might be passing papers to other students or people in the audience. So just be cautious with using handouts, but they're a great visual aid. You can use overhead transparencies. If you're showing a demonstrative speech on how to tie the perfect bow tie, you can use your hands and a bow tie to show how to do that by projecting it with an overhead. And you can finally, you can use boards and posters as well. Boards and posters are the things that you see at like science fairs. You know, the boards that open up, that have the little flap wings. Boards are good because they stand there, they're steady. You can put pictures on there. You can put letters on there, words on there, all kinds of visual things you can put on a poster board. All right, I want to thank everybody for listening to another episode of the Communication Lecture Series. I'm your host, Adam Banks. It's always a pleasure. I will see you in the next episode. Be sure to follow the Communication Lecture Series on Facebook by just going to facebook.com/Communication Lecture Series to keep up with all of the episodes. Have a great week, everybody.
System ain't nothing